Okay, in this episode of the Career Catapult podcast, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I feel like in the last few episodes, and most of the time, we are talking about strategy to land your promotion, because I know that's what a lot of people want, right? How do I land my internal promotion, my external promotion, and what are the strategies to make that happen? And I wanted to take a pause on that for a moment and have a conversation that I would say is much more philosophical, maybe somewhat existential in nature, and this is part of where I am in my life and my career too. And I know that for many of you, based on the conversations we're having behind the scenes, you are asking some of these big questions in your career as well. And so I thought, as we're still in that new year time frame, that we take a moment and really address that and talk about what that looks like. And so um, today's topic is titled "On Courage When You Already Know Too Much." Courage when you already know too much. Okay. Now, in the last year or so in my life, the word courage has taken a different meaning, a much more layered, real meaning for me. I used to think of courage as just having the confidence or the nerve to do something hard, something difficult. And but in this current season of my life, where there have been a lot of things going on personally, but also a lot of the career goals that I set for myself in the last decade or so have happened. I am living those goals now. I've worked really, really hard, but I've achieved a lot of things I set out to do in the last 10 years. Okay. And so courage begins to look different. And maybe for you, you're in the same boat where you look back and you say, yeah, the things I said I wanted to do 10 years ago, I've achieved most of those things. Maybe not all, but most of them. Despite all the challenges I've achieved, whether it's the income level that you wanted to be in, whether it's the job title that you wanted to have, the kind of company you wanted to work for, the kind of team you wanted to lead, whatever it was, there are goals that you set in your career and otherwise that you have worked really hard on and you've achieved. Okay. And so at that place, courage really becomes about will. It's about the willingness to keep going. You get to a certain point where this becomes a test of will. It's this existential test of will, okay? And it's about the willingness to keep going. So maybe you're somebody who's a senior director or a VP or even an SVP, and you've already achieved a certain income level, whatever number, there's always a number we all have in our heads that people have told you that's the number. This is a number where you finally have enough, right? Maybe you've achieved that. It could be 300K, 400K, 500K. You're there. Okay. And so now you quietly wonder, like, what's next, and what you might even wonder what I'm talking about when I say courage. Like, what does courage have to do with anything? And so I want to talk about that for a little bit. Why it takes courage. Why courage is a thing that you need in this particular moment in this season when you've already accomplished so much of what you set out to do, right? When the things that were in your vision, you've already accomplished, and you're in between visions. You're in that liminal phase where you're in between, right? Why does it take courage, and what's the role of courage? Why is courage important there? Well, because you know too much, right? You know too much. The fatigue at this level can be existential. It's a deeper level of fatigue, okay? It's kind of like climbing Mount Everest and you get halfway through. Like maybe when you were at the ground floor and you looked at the top, you're like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna get to the top. Well, when you get to the middle, you now know too much about what it's going to take. And the fatigue is like bone deep, you know? It's existential. That's why. Okay? The naivety, the naiveness that you may have had has fallen away. All of that naive thinking that you had in the very beginning about what it would take to get to a certain point, to get to the pinnacle, that's all gone. The rose-colored glasses have broken. Okay? And with each accomplishment that you have, the novelty and the feelings are less and less and less and less. Remember the first time you made 100K? Can you remember that? Think back. The first time you were able to land a role that paid you $100,000. Do you remember? I know it feels like eons ago, but do you remember how that felt? Right? The first time you got your first team member, you went from being an IC to being a leader of people. Remember that feeling? Okay, it's like you finally made it. And every promotion since, or every increase since, you may find hasn't quite delivered on those same feelings that you had, right? So the novelty of each new achievement diminishes over time. Okay? You know too much. You've seen too much. You now know what the cost is. You know what it actually cost to get you here. The late nights, the office politics, the close calls, the near misses, the imposter syndrome that you've been masking under the competence, okay, that you think nobody else sees. The relentless demands, the demands that keep coming. You solve one problem, there's a new one. There's a new one every day. That it never ends, it never stops. The ever ratcheting targets. Last year it was 100 million. You and your team knocked it out of the park. You got to 102. And now they want 250. So the demands and the targets keep ratcheting. They keep increasing. Okay? And then underneath all of it, there's this low-grade anxiety that you've been living with for years. You carry it so well, it's become invisible, but it's there and you know it's there. So there's this cost. This has not been without cost. There's this cost that you've borne over time in getting to where you've gotten now. So yeah, at some point you're asking yourself, like, can I keep doing this? Do I want to keep doing this? And it's important to, I think it's really important to ask those questions and to face them head on, right? Because I'm not a big believer in sort of just unintentionally, autopilot. Just I'm a big believer in being clear so that you can determine what you're going to do next. Okay? Versus just phoning it in, letting each day pass. That leads to a deeper level of underwhelm that has its own cost. Okay, that has its own cost. But a clear-eyed decision that you're making to do whatever it is you're going to do in this next chapter it's so key. Whatever the decision ends up being. But you have to be clear-eyed and you have to be decisive about it versus just letting each day pass, right? In this limbo. Right? In this limbo. So you know too much, you've seen too much, you know what the costs have been. The costs have been enormous, okay, to get to where you've gotten. And you're asking yourself, do I want to keep going? It's kind of like someone in undergrad, okay? If you ask someone who's a fresh grad from undergrad, and you ask them, what do you want to do in your career? They might say something like, I want to be CEO, I want to be in the C-suite, I want to make $1 million. But they don't know. They don't know. Not in the way you do. You know, right? There's that childlike innocence that's cute. But all of that's been long gone. That's fallen away for you completely years ago. Because you know. You know. Okay. And this is the moment, this is a point where many high performers, and I talk to many people like this all day, every day, who start to look for exits disguised as balance. They start to look for what might be an easier path to having the financial security, to having the career satisfaction. They're looking for an easier path. Maybe I can go work for this other company that won't be as challenging. The one that I hear, and I'm going to go on a little tangent here for a moment. This is my own thought on this, right? I hear a lot of people who have spent their time in corporate, and then they'll say to me, I just want to go work for, I don't know, a company that is a nonprofit that's doing some good things in the world. And yes, on some level, there's that they want to work in something that's mission driven. But there's, for a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, underneath that is this belief that it will be easier. It'll be less demanding. And in a lot of cases, it's not. It's not. You find that you've just traded much of your income thinking that something was going to be easier and give you more freedom, except that now you're doing more with less and the demands aren't less. And you are frustrated and dissatisfied because you're used to getting a lot done. You're used to making more impact in the market, more impact in the world than you're able to in your current chapter. But I digress, right? This isn't true for everyone, but I see it often where it's like, I'm looking for something that will be easier. No one ever says that. They don't say I'm looking for something easier. They just mask it as something else, right? So I get that. This is where people start to look for exits because they're looking for what they think will be more balance. Okay. And again, who could blame them? If that's somewhere that you found yourself, who could blame you? I get it. I get it. I've had my own version. Just so you know, I'm not, I'm telling you what I know personally. I'm not speaking about this from a pedestal. I have had my own version of that fantasy. I've had my own version of that thought myself. Okay. There are mornings where the idea of just closing this chapter, okay, taking down my shingle, okay, and getting a quiet job at a beautiful bookstore sounds really tempting. Okay. I've had that thought in my head since, I don't know, maybe like 5 years into my corporate career. Like, I could just make a good living working at a bookstore. I love books. It would be the dream job. I've had that conversation, right? Or going to find a job at a nice restaurant, a nice five-star restaurant. I also love food, like really good food. So these are thoughts I flirted with. So I get it. I get it. I still have those thoughts. There are mornings I wake up and I'm like, we have been able to, partner with hundreds of women, over 700, almost 800 women, in landing skip level promotions. And some days I'm like, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's cool. Maybe I can say I've done that. We have given tens of thousands of dollars every year in scholarships to undergrad. I'm like, maybe that's good enough. I've had those moments too. So I'm not speaking about this as someone who doesn't have those same thoughts every now and then. Okay. And I'm not saying that I've thought about it because I can't keep going. No, I'm saying that because, like you, I know exactly what it takes to continue. I know the cost. I know what it takes. I know the toll, okay, that it costs. And yet, I'm not done. I'm not done. So I really want you to ask yourself whether any of this describes the thoughts, the feelings, the fears that you have had, and maybe you haven't been able to say that loud to anybody because everyone thinks you're crushing it, For many of you, many of the women I speak with, and the men too, you're the breadwinner in your family. And so you're like, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear, I don't want to burden them with these thoughts. I don't want to burden them with these concerns that I'm having, you know? And so you just quietly keep going. Okay. So I know exactly what it takes. I've had the same thoughts. But I know what continuing would require. I know what that will require. But I also know that I'm not done. Okay. And maybe that's the same for you. Maybe you know that you're not done. Here's what I've learned for myself personally, and also through the senior leaders that I work with, is that you get to, there's certain people, myself included, for whom growth is just the essence of who you are. Okay. The idea that you've gotten to a point where you're just gonna, like, you've gotten to a point and you're not at the pinnacle yet. You're not the best that you could be. And then you're just gonna say, well, I'm just gonna stop. Like, that's just not who I am. And it's likely that that's not who you are too. If you and I are connected and you found yourself here, whether it's on this podcast or somehow still being connected to what we do, chances are you're the kind of person for whom growth is the essence of who you are. And I would even venture to say growth is the essence of life itself. It's what life is. It's the reason you put a seed in the ground, it will grow. Even under some really tough, harsh conditions, it will still grow. It's the essence of life. It's what life is made of, right? So perhaps you recognize that in yourself, that you are someone who will grow. I used to joke that I'm the kind of person, like, even when I talk about going to get a job at a bookstore, right? I already know myself. I know that even if I got a job at a bookstore working the front desk, I would still be the person looking for continuous improvement. I'd be the person trying to figure out the supply chain for the books. It's the same. Like, if you ever travel with me, when I travel with family, they're just like, can we just go through the terminal? Do we have to? Because I'm in there saying, like, well, why is that lane closed? If they would just open that, this would move 30% faster. That's just how I am. That's just the way my brain works. Okay. So I already know that about myself, right? I already know that. But if you were somebody, if you went and just locked yourself away in the forest somewhere with all the trees, you'd be trying to figure out how to cut down all the trees and make sure they're organized and create pathway. Like, that's just the nature of a certain person. And rather than making that a liability, it's just recognizing that that's who you are and that is an asset. Growth is inherent in who you are. And so The thing about growth is it's not going to stop asking something of you just because you've accomplished a lot. Just because you've done a lot in the last 10 years, growth doesn't say, oh, well, you've done a lot. And so I'm going to turn off that part of you now. Okay. That part of you no longer exists. You don't have to grow anymore. You can just stagnate and just stay where you are. No. Growth, by its nature, will demand something of you in some way, shape, or form. Okay. And it's important for you to know that so that you're not resentful of growth when it comes. Like you understand, oh, that's just what growth feels like. I hope this is resonating for someone. I know when I got it. And I was like, oh, okay. This is what growth feels like. It is somewhat uncomfortable at times, most of the time. Okay. And I should know to expect that. I should know to expect that feeling. Okay. And that's where courage comes in. That's why you need the courage to not fold, to not shrink, to not choose comfort, even though you've earned the right to be comfortable. You've earned the right to choose comfort. You could very well say right now, you know what? I'm a director, I'm a senior director, I'm just going to coast. Except that in this day and age, there are real costs to that too. It may not be quite the foolproof plan that you or fail-proof plan that you think, but you could just, for a time anyway, just decide to just see what happens, you know? You could do that, but that's where courage comes in, the courage to not do that, to not fold, to not shrink, to not diminish the goal, right? So if your goal is to be a C-suite leader, if there's even a part of you that has set that goal to say, I want to be in the C-suite, you're really close, for one. You're close. If you're listening to this, you're a senior director, you're closer than you know. You're closer than you think. I remember just recently talking to a client of ours who, when she came before she joined our program, she filled out her application. We make all our clients fill out an application. She filled out the application and she said, I asked the question, what is the goal that you want to achieve? And she said she wanted to be in the C-suite. And she wanted to be there, I think she said 3 or 5 years. Okay, that was the goal. Well, she's in the role now. She's a C-suite leader now, right? So sometimes you set the goal off in the distance, thinking it has to take all this time. You're closer than you think. You're closer than you know. So if the goal that you set is to be in the C-suite, or even if it's not to be in the C-suite, it's to achieve the highest level that you are capable of. The highest level that you are capable of. You have to be asking yourself questions like, why? Why? Why do I want that? And the right answer isn't why not. I mean, you want it to be more than why not, because that's not enough. If you say why not, that might work for a minute, but those really tough days, that's not going to get you through. It's not going to get you there. You want to find real reasons. Why do I want this? What is my why? Why do I want to be at this level? Why do I want this level of income? Why do I want this level of impact? Right? That's an important question you have to ask and answer. If you don't have those answers, you'll find yourself on autopilot and you will give up and you will burn out. No question. You have to first begin with why this matters to you. And I've said this before, you're going to have to whittle down and remove all of the elements of the why that aren't really yours. All of the things that you maybe adopted from other people. Well, that other person did it, so why can't I? That for many people, that's a big reason why they're doing it. Well, if she can do it, why can't I do it? That's not a reason. That's not a reason. That will not work. It will get you through on the days that are easy. On those tough days when you are tempted to give up, the fact that someone else did it is not going to matter. So find your own internal motivation, your own internal reason, your own internal momentum for why this is important to you. Don't skip this step. Don't skip this step. Okay. Get really clear on that. Okay. And then ask yourself, what kind of leader do you want to be at that level? Now that you understand the cost, okay? Now that you understand that getting to the C-suite is not a walk in the park. You're not going to be able to just skip, hop, and just la your way into that role. For one, there are lots of other people who want it. There's stiff competition for that role, okay? So now that you get that, and now that you see what has happened or what it's cost to you so far, what kind of leader do you want to be? What's the counterweight to that? What will happen when you're now a C-suite leader? What's the impact that you want to make? What's the way that you want people to be and to feel while working for you? What's the outcome that you're going after? Right? Get clear on that too. And then here's another question I have. These are questions these are big, big questions. These are not questions I'd expect you to answer just, unless you've been doing this work already. I want you to sit with this stuff, okay? Here's another one. Where are you still spending way more mental and emotional energy than you ought to be? Where are you still spending lots of energy? Not physical. Your work isn't really physical. It's mental and emotional. Where are you spending way more of that to get to a certain outcome? That's the stuff, that's what's tiring you out. That's the fatigue. Okay. Where are you still carrying this heavy load, this heavy weight? I mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. That is a weight. Even if you think no one else can see it, it's weighing on you. It's costing you. So where are you still expending? This is it's a physics thing. It's a math equation. You're expending energy. Two people can go to work for the same company in the same role. One person can go home still full of energy, still ready to give to their loved ones and to explore their hobbies and all the things. And the other person is completely depleted, both mentally and emotionally, right? We're talking about a capacity gap here. So where are you still expending more than you ought to? Like a duck that's paddling underwater, it looks glossy, seamless and glossy on the surface, but underneath you're expending so much more to keep it up, to make it seem like. Maybe it's time to fix that once and for all, rather than carrying that with you, trying to get to the next level. It won't work. It won't work. Okay. What would it look like? This is another question. What would it look like to enter this next chapter of your career with intention, not just endurance? Not just the endurance of, again, paddling like the duck, but intentional about how every day will go and who you will be in those moments. You may not be able to have complete certainty. In fact, probably far from it. Your work and your days are probably full of ambiguity and uncertainty, right? And last minute changes and lots of pressure. But who you are and who you get to be through that is what really matters. You may not be able to control what comes at you, but how you handle it and who you are and how your teams experience you through that is what matters most. And so imagine if going into that next chapter, you decided to be intentional about who you would be versus I'm going to work on my endurance. I'm going to just power through. Powering through is what got you here. It's what got you to this crossroads where you're wondering if you can do it. It's the powering through. And what I'm really getting at here is that the way you've done your career up until now may have worked. It got you here. It does not need to be the way that you continue. Hear me loud and clear. You can do things differently. You should do things differently. You get to do things differently. You can decide now, you know what, all that like anxiety and the fear and the imposter syndrome and worrying about people's hierarchy and status and allowing that to make me anxious around them, like all those things, the fear of missing a deadline or the fear of talking to the board or like, what if you just decided to tackle that once and for all? Do you know how formidable you would be if you got rid of that once and for all? You would be unstoppable. You'd be untouchable. You'd be magical. And you can have that and you can be that. And it's the only way to having an enjoyable season and chapter in this next phase of your career. It's the only way. It's the commitment to being better in those areas, not just in your competency, your function, your expertise. You've got that, but it's the other stuff. It's the who you're being, right? So sit with those questions and see what they unearth for you and see what you do with them, right? What will you do with the answers that you get? That's what this is really about. Now, if you're listening to this and you are already a vice president and you would like to work with me privately to address your real leadership challenges, right? To not only discuss this, right? Because these are all existential conversations we can have, but really the point of the relationship would be to address these challenges, to pursue measurable strategic outcomes that you want in your career. If that's the sort of thing that you are ready for and you'd like to focus on and make happen this year, then I have a few openings in my calendar to work with you to make that happen. So if you're interested in a private one-on-one engagement with me, go ahead and get in touch with us by emailing us at contact@intel, which is spelled INTELLE, contact@intel.us. Okay. And someone on my team will get you set up. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that this episode got you to think a little bit differently, give you a different perspective, pulled you out of your head for a moment so that you can see what's before you and you can make sense of it and begin to map out your next steps. I hope that that delivered for you. Share this with someone else who you know is also at that existential part of his or her career, and hopefully this is a thing that turns things around for them. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.